Hi and welcome to Cindy's Quilt Shop, Farm Girl Vintage Second Saturday Sampler, Month 2. This month we will be making the 3 blocks, baking day, butter churn, and canning jars. We're going to start off with the baking day block. Please remember we are using the 6-inch block size, not the 12-inch, to make sure you know which way to cut. In your packets of fabric, you do have extra fabric allowance all the way around, so you will need to trim down your pieces to the correct size. Also, make sure you cut your background fabric all the way. So to start with, we're going to work with a couple of the straight line block pieces first, making the handle, and then sewing the large bull stripe to the top of the large bull. So we're going to take our handle and sew it in between with 1/4 inch between 2 background pieces. And at the same time, I'm just going to chain piece and sew the bull stripe to the top of the bull. Now I'm going to sew the other side of my background. So now I have my bull stripe sewn to the top of my bowl and my handle for my spoon. You're going to press the handle of the spoon towards your dark colored fabric, and they do come right close together. And you are going to press towards the stripe for the large bowl. Next, we are going to make our spoon head. You're going to take your 1-inch background squares. You can either draw a line on the diagonal, or if you are using the Clearly Perfect Angle or Lori Holt's seam guide, you won't need to mark the lines. And you're going to stitch on the diagonal on each of the 4 corners. You are either going to sew on the line or actually just a hair right next to it. So you go around and do all 4, and it's going to be the stitch and flip method that we talked about last month, where the line is stitched, you're going to cut off either with your rotary cutter or with a pair of scissors, leaving a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And you're going to do that on all 4. Then you're going to press towards your background fabrics. Next, we're going to construct our small bowl. Same method before. You're going to take your 1-inch background squares and either draw a line on the diagonal, and you're going to sew right next to it. And you're going to do one on the lower corner of both sides of the rectangle. Again, cut off the extra fabric on both sides, and you're going to press towards the background. You're going to do the same thing to the large bowl bottom, except this time you're going to use your larger background squares, stitching on that diagonal line, or just a thread count next to it. Trim away on both sides so it looks like this, and then you're going to press towards your background. And now we're going to start assembling our block. So we're going to make our spoon. We're going to take the spoon head and the spoon stick part, and we're going to stitch it using a 1/4 inch seam. Like so, and press towards the spoon head. Then you're going to take this piece and save it because we're going to use it with our small bowl piece. With our small bowl piece, you're going to add a piece of background to the left hand side, or the right hand side, excuse me. and you're going to press towards the background fabric. So now we're going to sew our spoon and our small bowl together. And we're going to take our large bowl with the stripe and we're going to attach those two together. Now with the small bowl and the spoon, it's still not quite large enough yet to attach to our large bowl. So we're going to take our remaining piece of background and we're going to sew it on the other side. And press to the background. Now you would take your iron, whereas I'm just finger pressing. You'll take your iron to make it nice and flat. But now you are ready to sew together your large bowl to your small bowl and spoon. Press it one final time towards the large bowl and your 6.5-inch block is finished. As you can see, you can make it in a larger 12-inch side. We added extra background around it to make a wall hanging for the kitchen. For those of you doing the bright color way, our block is here. It's very similar color-wise. Moving on, we're going to do the butter churn block now. Now the butter churn block has a couple of different steps to do. First thing we're going to do is make our pinwheel in the center. For those of you doing the country colorway, it's going to be a black color. For those of you doing the bright colorway, it is a navy. So you can mark your diagonal line on the wrong side of your black or navy, and you're going to sew 1/4 inch on each side of that line to give you 2 half-square triangles. Now for this one, I add 1/8 inch when I cut that letter H and letter C of the background for this block. I like to give myself a little bit of wiggle room when I cut. So on both sides, we are going to cut down the middle. You can use a pair of scissors. You can use your rotary cutter to give you your 2 half-square triangles. Press towards the dark fabric, and you'll need a total of 4. Now since I add that extra piece in there, I need to square it up. This is where I like to use my block ruler. There's a groove in the ruler, and that's the side where your seam goes. It forces it to go nice and straight. And I'm squaring them up to 1.5 inches. So I do 2 sides, and if you have a rotating mat, it's a great time to use it. And then I'm going to trim off on the other side. Again, making sure my seam is locked in that groove. And now I have my finished squares. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to turn it into a pinwheel. So now we've made our pinwheel center. The different thing I do compared to Lori's, she has you press your seams open. I choose not to. I press them to the side and then I spiral my center to create a mini pinwheel. This kind of makes it lie a little bit flatter, but if you want to press open, feel free to press your seams open. So once you have your pinwheel made, we are now going to add our frame around it. With our frame, we are going to press towards the frame pieces. I add the right and the left sides first, and now I'm going to add the top and the bottom. still using a 1/4 inch seam. And again, you're going to press towards the frame. And that is the center of our block. So now we are going to take our outer star fabric and we are going to draw lines on both sides of the diagonal. I like to use these Omni Grid rulers because this solid line down the center is what I put my diagonal line on, and it's a 1/4 inch on each side, which we will be marking. Do it to both sides so it makes an X. And then you can take it over to your iron and press a crease. The crease is where we are going to cut them apart. If you've used a friction pen, you are not going to want to press it, or otherwise your lines will disappear. So you could finger press it. Now where those intersections are, we are going to cut it in half to give us 4 squares. So now we're going to use those blocks to give us some flying geese. We're going to take our large background square, lay 2 on top, and we are going to stitch right next to, just a thread's length away from those lines you just drew. Make sure you stitch on both sides, and there will be some overlap in the center. And then either using your rotary cutter or a pair of scissors, we're going to cut right down the middle. Like so. And you're going to press your pieces towards the dark. Now with your leftover squares, you're going to place 1 on each side to give us 2. And then we are going to sew on both sides of the line again, thus giving us 4 flying geese. Then again, using a pair of scissors or a rotary cutter and a ruler, cut down the middle. And that gives us 4 flying geese, and we are going to press towards the dark again. Now, you also want to make sure that your flying geese are the correct size, so double check in your book after you've made your flying geese and make sure you come out to the size that she wants you to have. So our final step in making the butter churn block is we need to make 1 more set of half square triangle units. You're going to take your background squares along with your outer star, draw the line down the center, so 1/4 inch on both sides. You're going to do it to 2 blocks, so you have a total of 4 half square triangles. And you can chain piece them if you'd like. And then just like before, we're going to cut down the center, either using our scissors or our rotary cutter. And you're going to press towards the darker fabric. Square them up to give us 4 half square triangles. Then lay them out with your block like so. And then you'll start to assemble your block, sewing 1 row together, then the next, then the next, watching which direction you press, and you'll have a 6-inch block. For those of you doing the bright colorway, it's going to look similar to the one up here. And now for our final block, the canning jars. These are just so adorable. So you're going to take your 6 colored fabrics, make sure they're all cut. For those of you doing the bright, your block looks like this, and some of them have word phrases, so just find the center and make it work for the size it needs to be. What you do to one of these squares is what you're going to do to all of these squares. You're going to take your background square fabrics. The 2 larger squares are going to go on the top. You can either draw that diagonal line or just stitch it. Now I know after you do the larger square, that smaller square background piece you have, it is a small piece, but it's very doable, and you'll do it the exact same way of Lori's stitch and flip method. So as you can see, my top of my jar has the 2 larger squares. You can do this at the beginning or at the end when you've done all 4. You'll trim off the extra because you will be pressing it, and you're going to press them open. I know it seems like it could be easy to just press to one side, but I have found, especially with this block, it really helps to have that seam pressed open. So you'll continue until you have all 4 done. As you can tell, my smaller squares are at the bottom, my larger squares are at top, and my seams have been pressed open. The pressing stiletto I showed is really handy because then you don't burn your fingers when you are pressing these small seams open. Now, to create the lids, you're going to strip piece. You're going to take the piece of lid fabric, which is gray, with your background pieces, and sew them in strips. Press your seams open, and then we're going to cut apart our lids. All the way across the whole strip. So I have 6 different lid pieces. Now, when Lori constructed hers, she and I do it slightly differently. She sews her lids together in a row and then sews her jar pieces together in a row. Personally, I did not do it that way. I found it easier to actually sew my squares into jars first and then sew them that way. Whatever you find that works best for you, do that. I'm going to show you how I did mine. So the lids go on the side with the top where it's the larger square. So the reason why I don't do my lids first is because when I have my jars made, I choose to press my lids in alternating ways, just as added security to make sure my seams all line up. So like this one, the seam's pressed down, this one's the seam's pressed up, and this one's pressed down again. Then I like to put them together using fork pins. The fork pins are really nice because they grab that pressed open seam on both sides, so I know that my seams are going to look perfect. And I also will pin where my seams match, and then I'm going to sew with 1/4 inch. You're going to sew them into groups of 3 like this, and then you'll sew them together all set like so. And there you have your canning jar block. Just a reminder for those of you doing the bright, we have it here. We also have Lori Holt's Canning Day jar quilt for a larger wall hanging if you are interested. We look forward to seeing you next month on second Saturday, November 14th. Remember, doors open at 8:30. It starts right on time at 9 o'clock. Be sure to bring your show and tells with you and your finished blocks to get the next month's free. If you don't want to come on the second Saturday, please join us on the third Tuesday of the month, November 17th at 6:30 p.m. is when our session starts. Doors open at 6. We look forward to seeing you there with your finished blocks and show and tell. Until next month, bye.